G'day guys, Matt here from Not in the Manual. I just needed to run a quick errand for work and I need to go onto a motorway for a little while, so I thought I would just do a bit of a drive experience with the Model Y. So I'm coming down Pennant Hills Road here, so 3-lane road, hitting a couple of rough sections of road here. Now that's something I've been impressed with this car, is it's pretty smooth without being too comfortable. So I really hesitate to call this comfort suspension, but it does get rid of the bone jarring. So my Model 3, the suspension was pretty stiff, and every little pothole and bump in the road you would feel. With the Model Y, a lot of those little smaller bumps and jarring and potholes are just smoothed out, and it's quite nice. And really there's just not much body roll in this car at all. It does feel a bit heavier than the Model 3. It's not as nimble as the Model 3, but it's a good balance between handling and comfort, I feel anyway, with my limited experience. So we need to go onto a motorway over here. Now the sound noise dampening in this car, I think is improved over the Model 3. Now I did a bit of a sound comparison the best I could. I've got to release a tyre review on the e-Primacy tyres. Now I did a bit of a noise test in the car back then and compared the same sort of Model 3 with the Pilot Sport 4 tyres and did a bit of a sound comparison. And straight away, doing that same test in this car, I'm getting around 4 decibels quieter, which is actually a pretty significant change. Having the double glazed glass front and rear helps with a lot of the surrounding traffic noise, but the noisiest part of this car is still the tyres. And this car has the Michelin Pilot Sport EV, so they're a dedicated EV tyre, and I've found that they are quite quiet and efficient, and they feel quite nice to drive with. So you're getting really nice, good steering response from the Pilot Sport EV tyre. I think that's due to probably some thicker or a bit more stiff sidewalls in that tyre. And sound-wise, it seems pretty comparable tyre noise to the Model 3 just off my ear, but obviously we're getting some sound dampening, and I think it's a combination of things. I think the tyres are still the noisiest part, but I think it's just reducing how that sound reverberates into the cabin. There's a lot more soft areas, a lot more carpeted areas in this newer Model Y now, 2023. And I think that really just helps with how the sound bounces around the cabin and what you perceive, what sound noise you're perceiving. So I've found this car is noticeably quieter, but the Model 3 never really bothered me. I never found it too noisy. I mean, as I've said before, I was coming from 4-wheel drives, big SUVs. The quietest car I had was the Volkswagen Tiguan that I had before the Model 3. And so yes, the Model 3 was noisier than that, but it was never a significant issue. Even on the motorway, I did find, I had to talk a little bit louder, I guess, when I was making a video, but it was mostly tyre noise. And when I changed to the Michelin e-Primacy tyres, that actually helped bring that tyre noise down a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reset my trip. So I am going to reset trip A once I'm up at motorway speed. So then I'm not counting the acceleration here into the on-ramp. And this is a 100 km/h zone, and I've got about 20 kilometers to sit on here. And I know that's not a really long enough distance to do a proper efficiency test, but I thought I would just do this initial one, combining a bit of a chat about the drive feel of this car, combined with that. So already here, I'm doing 90 km/h, and the noise from outside and the wind noise is just reduced. I don't know, you can see I've hit a couple little potholes there, and they're really, really well dampened. So I'll get over in the middle lane here because that left lane is ending. And Greg, that's for you. Put autopilot on. We'll set it to 100 kilometers an hour. And now what I'm going to do is reset that trip. So trip A is reset here. We might just put the current consumption thing on here and put it to the last 10 kilometers. So we're getting a bit more of an instant range. Or let's put the instant range on and have a look. So 130 watt hours per kilometer. We've got some, I don't know if you can hear that, we've got some really sort of lines in the road here creating a bit of a bumping noise. But a lot of that is really subdued now with this Model Y. That's the noisiest part. Wind noise isn't that bad. Even the actual tyre noise isn't that bad sitting here at 100 kilometers an hour. So yeah, we'll just let that do its thing. Now, yeah, I've been pretty impressed with the elevated drive height in this car as well. I'm just so glad to be back into an SUV. I know there's just so many SUVs on the road, but there's a reason why SUVs are so popular. And for me, it's not a matter of feeling safer in a bigger car. It's more just having that extra storage, having that elevated driving position, being able to see past the cars in front of you a bit easier. And it just gives you that better vision around. And we might just auto lane change here and get past this slow truck. So yeah, this won't be a super scientific efficiency test. But yeah, I'll just give a rough idea. See, I've been pretty happy with how the car drives acceleration-wise in this car. So this has the lower powered motor, it's about 20 to 30 kilowatts less. But when I've looked at the peak power of this motor, it's very, very similar to what I had in the Model 3 with the performance rear motor. And that would often go above 230 kilowatts. And I measured a peak power from that car at 239 kilowatts. Now remember, that was the 2021 Model 3, the first LFP battery, so it had a lot more power than the current Model 3 rear-wheel drive, and it had the more powerful motor. Now the main benefit with that motor was more torque. So that motor had 440 Newton meters of torque as opposed to the 340 Newton meters of torque that this motor has and the current Model 3 rear-wheel drive. That's what I've noticed the difference with here. This car hits its peak power at a different point to the Model 3. So I find this car feels really sluggish up until about 60 kilometers an hour, and then you can really start feeling it pull. Now that is all sort of an artificial curve that Tesla, they control how quick this car can accelerate, how they deliver the power to that motor. Now we all like to think that electric cars have this instant bucket load of torque from zero. They are capable of that, but it is always dialed back. If we got the full torque to the motor from the start, we would just be spinning the wheels like crazy. The traction control system would be working overtime, and that just doesn't happen. So really what it is we're just seeing a controlled torque curve, a power curve during acceleration, and that is set by Tesla in the software and controlled by the motor inverter and supplying power to that motor. So we might just get back over here and let some cars pass. Yeah, so, I mean, look, I don't regret it. This isn't as nimble as the Model 3, but I just think there's just so many more benefits to that. That's not why I bought the Model 3. I didn't buy it as a performance car. Now, if I was a single guy, I didn't travel much, I didn't need the extra storage of the Model Y, and I really love my performance, well, the Model 3 rear-wheel drive is going to give you that performance thrill, and it's going to be a bit more of a compact car, but still does give a fair amount of storage for comparable size cars. But this Model Y is just on another level storage-wise and space-wise, and if you often have 3 people in the back, Model Y is just much better for that. So yeah, driving, I don't miss the Model 3 at all. You still get this nice, smooth, quiet drive, and we'll just get back over into that lane. Speed up again. So where's the consumption sitting on at the moment? 105 watt hours per kilometre. Average for the last 10 kilometres. And what are we looking at here? 132 watt hours per kilometre on the trip meter. So I'm expecting this car to sit somewhere around 150, 160 watt hours per kilometre over a longer journey at motorway speeds. So here in Australia, often we're 100 kilometre an hour zone. You can see this is quite a nice road, well-made road, but we're limited to 100 kilometres an hour, which isn't that great here in Australia, but it is there for a reason, I guess, because these stretches of good road are few and far between. So we have those speed limits for a reason. But that would account, so if you're in Europe or America or somewhere and trying to compare your consumption figures, that's why my figures might look a little bit better than what you get over your lifetime of the car, because you're going to be traveling at 120, 130, 140 kilometers an hour along your motorways. So for me, it's 100 kilometers an hour average on most long trips. So that's pretty good. It's dropped down to 128 watt hours per kilometer now. Sitting at 100, I mean, how good is that? I'm sitting in a big SUV and getting that sort of efficiency. This car is just amazing. Yeah, 100% this car is definitely quieter than the Model 3. Sitting here at 100 kilometer an hour zones, I'm definitely just not getting the noise from the cars passing by. With the Model 3, I used to get a lot of the cars would pass by and I would get the wind noise from them. And that was, you know, you could get a lot more noise coming through. Anyway, you can see these guys aren't really thinking about me doing my efficiency test, doing 70 kilometers an hour in a 100 kilometer an hour zone. And I've got a steady stream of cars coming here, so I can't get past. All right, they've pulled over. I think they've got some issues, so I can't be too harsh with someone doing that. They must be doing that for good reason. Another thing I want to talk about is regen braking with this Model Y. Now, I don't know if it's just a 60 kilowatt hour battery, the difference from my Model 3, which had a 55 kilowatt hour battery. This car doesn't seem to be as harshly limited when the battery is cold for regen. So my battery this morning was at 20 degrees and I had 65 kilowatts of regen power. And I've found that the regen just feels a lot more consistent in the Model Y. Now, I rely on you guys to give me some feedback on that, because that just may be normal in the newer Model 3 with the 60 kilowatt hour battery. But at 20 degrees Celsius with my Model 3, my regen would have been limited down to about 40 kilowatts. So maybe that was just the smaller battery. I've noticed in this car with the lesser power motor, it does tend to run a bit warmer. And that's probably just pushing around this bit of extra weight in the Model Y. The Model Y isn't significantly heavier than the Model 3. My Model 3 was 1.7 ton, and this car is 1.9 ton. So it's just like having, you know, maybe 3 heavier people in the car with you. So it's not a massive significant difference. But that smaller motor, I think, is probably working harder to do the same amount of work. So having that less torque available. So I've noticed that it does run a bit warmer. I often see it up at about 45 degrees for that rear motor, which is still an acceptable temperature, but it's just runs a little bit warmer than the performance, the 3D6 motor that was in my Model 3 Standard Range Plus. Steering feel in this car, it feels pretty much the same as a Model 3. It's a little bit heavier, and obviously this is a bigger car. You can feel that it's an SUV. It's not as nimble steering wise as well as the Model 3 was. But once again, that doesn't bother me. It's not going to handle as well as the Model 3, but you got to remember this still has a lot of weight. It has a low center of gravity, and I've got to take this exit here. So it has a low center of gravity still. So this car is still fun to throw into a corner, and having the 20-inch wheels going for that option makes it a little bit more fun. So I'm sitting on 114 watt hours per kilometer here. That was just a flat freeway run, but that's still pretty impressive. We can look at the energy app here and see we're at 100 watt hours per kilometer for the last 10 kilometers. Yeah, pretty good. So yeah, quite impressed. That's one of the few freeway runs that I have done in this car since I bought it. So I really haven't done much motorway freeway driving. So that was a bit of an initial sort of run for me, and I'm pretty impressed. This car is just so smooth, quiet. That's suspension change. It may just seem like a slight difference to some people, but for me, coming straight from that Model 3 to this car, it is a big difference for me. And that lowering of the noise level in the car, it's noticeable. I never used to think it bothered me in the Model 3, but obviously now driving a quieter car, it does make a difference. So you can see here, acceleration wise, it's not super impressive. It's still got that nice whine of the electronics in the back of the car when I accelerate, and I love that. I love hearing the electric motor do its thing, do its work. I mean, not having I used to be thrilled by the sound of a petrol motor doing its job. And the same thing when I'm mountain biking. I just love hearing the bike do its work. I love hearing the suspension do its work over tree roots and rocks. Same thing, I love hearing a car do its thing. And a lot of people say that the electric cars are soulless. They don't have that noise of the petrol engine, but for me, I can hear that electronics whine, and that gives me as much of a thrill as listening to a V8, power along. I worked on electric forklifts for years, and you could hear if something was wrong. You could hear that electronics, and troubleshooting electric motors and things. So for so many years, I just get a real buzz from that. And yeah, so look guys, I've had the car for almost a week now. I'm loving it, no regrets. And yeah, you saw there, autopilot did its thing, no problem along the motorway. Auto lane change worked without a hitch. So gradually things are getting better with autopilot. I still have a love-hate relationship with it. The Model Y, I've had a couple of runs to work commuting with autopilot engaged, and it's been slightly better, but I think that's not so much to do with the camera sitting at a higher position. I think it's just pot luck with the drive on that day and the conditions and what the cars are doing around you. It's really difficult to do an accurate autopilot test comparison between the cars. You just can't put them in the exact conditions every time you drive them to do a comparison. But for me, the Model Y, it's been working fine autopilot wise. It's pretty comparable to the Model 3. I'm not noticing any major differences there. And yeah, I don't know what else to go through here. The infotainment system has been a lot better. It's much quicker to calculate a route. The theatre side of things is a lot better. Visibility wise, I thought that rear window would be a bit of a problem looking out through it, but it turns out that it's not that bad. I just needed to get used to it. I feel the vision out of the rear is just very similar to the Model 3, which isn't that great anyway. So I don't feel like I've gotten significantly worse with my vision out the back. And these bigger side mirrors in the car are great. This tiny little revision mirror, I'm still, I don't know, it's the same as the Model 3, but it'd be nice to just have a bigger revision mirror there. That's my only gripe in that regard. So I've got a lot of accessories to fit. I've got some videos to do there. I made some commitments to review some products that were sent to me, and some others that I've bought myself as well. I'll be doing some reviews on those as well. So guys, we might just kill the video there. It was just a bit of a drive experience, drive feel sort of thing, and giving my opinion after owning the car for a week. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next video.